Hey, and welcome back to Soaring Profits Thursday Night Live, where we share with you the stories of the people that are out there doing stuff, changing the world, and making the world better for everybody. This guest that we have is no different. She is the wonderful Mena. I would say her last name, but right now I don't have it in front of me, and I'm not great with names. 16 years ago, she worked in the music industry. As in media, in I believe selling music. She'll explain it, I'm sure, further. And then she went on this incredible journey, which I'll let her explain. But the journey led her back to the world of horses, and she, as she's told me, conquered her fear of horses, and then not only that, led other people to conquer their fear of horses, and then use horses to as a therapy animal to unlock emotions and do a little bit of counseling and helping people out. If you check out her Instagram, there's some wonderful videos about testimonials explaining exactly what she does. There's one about this wonderful woman who was afraid of horses and showed up. And not only did she overcome her fear of horses, but while there were tears in her eyes, she explained how being with the horse and doing the stuff that Mena does with her unlocked memories that she forgot and helped her like overcome some big feelings. And I just love that stuff. And I think it's incredible. I've always thought that animals, especially horses, are intelligent, wonderful, caring animals that really know your feelings. A lot of people don't think that, but I've been around horses, and when you're not feeling yourself, or you're feeling upset, or you're feeling angry, I'm telling you right now, a horse knows. When you're scared, a horse knows. And I can't wait to talk to Mena about it. I know Patrick is chomping at the bit. Threw that in. Chomping at the bit to speak with her about horses because he does have a big history of horses. I know I'm a dad. I get a lot. Hey, I'm allowed to do dad jokes. Anyway, I am so happy you're with us. As soon as Lisa Browning told us about you, we were like, we have to have her on. I can't wait to talk to her. So Mena. So Mena, 16 years ago, you have a very successful job, making probably good money, I would assume, if you're working for the company that you mentioned you're working for. I'm not going to mention it because that's up to you if you want to mention it. But it's a fairly big company selling media. What would possess you to move away from that and go out on a very scary limb on something that is untested and unknown? What would do that?
Well, I'll tell you, I was in corporate for 16 years, and it was probably about 2004 when I really started to feel like something was missing. And at the time I was working for TELUS Mobility, so another, big corporate name. And I was there almost 5 years in total, but I was working my butt off, and it was fun. We had some really great times, but ultimately I was like, I had actually created something as part of we had like our best clients, and I created something as a perk, as an offer for the best clients, and it was Christmas, and I had given them the opportunity to select 3 different gifts, and one of them was that they could donate on our behalf, on TELUS's behalf, to a different charities. So I was delivering a check to Big Brothers Big Sisters of Canada for, I think, $40,000, $50,000 or something like that. And it was like, that for me means something. So I started reading books. What's the purpose of your life? What color is your parachute? All these books to try and find my purpose. And ultimately I came across an email from the Learning Annex way back in the day saying, are you ready to motivate and inspire people? Come out and find out about life coaching. So I did that. I showed up, and it was one of those things where immediately I was like, okay, this feels like it. And we had like a demo in the information night, and then we had to coach the person that we were sitting across from. And the woman was like, I got so much value from you. Thank you so much. And I'm like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but somehow it seemed to positively impact her. So I had this plan. I was going to work at getting clients for another 9 months. I don't know where I come up with these numbers, but and then I was going to leave. I was going to leave TELUS. And instead, TELUS and TELUS Mobility were merging at that time. And I was just coming back from Christmas holidays and was going to meet my new director. And I walk into a room with an HR person and the director. And this was not my first time being laid off. So I knew immediately. I think I got laid off 3 or 4 times. And it was like, your position is no longer required. And they were offering me a package and then said, if you stay a little longer, we'll pay you a little more to train the new person. My ego was not happy about any of this. And at the time I was managing partnerships, and Universal Music Canada was one of my partners. And a few days later, I got a message saying, hey, do you know anybody who might be interested in a part-time or covering a mat leave contract? I was like, yeah, I'll do it. So I went off to do the mat leave contract for 9 months. And it was challenging. It was stressful. It was in some ways toxic. And at the same time, when I took the coaching training, 3 of the teachers and the coaches had said, you should really consider the Coaching Institute's leadership program. And at the time, I did not see myself as a leader at all. And I just thought, oh, they'd probably just say that to everybody. But now I had the wherewithal to do it because I got a package. So I went and took that leadership program, which was a 10-month program, 4 trips to California. And they're asking you, why were you born at this time in history? What were you born at this time in history to do? And then I go back to the corporate thing at Universal, and it was this friction. And if anybody listening has been in this and maybe is in it right now, this doesn't align, but here I am. And I was tied to the money, it's like, it's not, I was living in a condo downtown Toronto, young and Queens Quay, as far downtown as you can get. And I would put an X on the calendar every day that I wanted to quit. There were a lot of X's on that calendar. And so, but here's the thing. It was a mat leave contract. So I knew it was finite. It was going to end. And then they said, we love you so much. We're going to create a new position just for you. So now I'm in limbo. Now I'm like, okay, now like this is really, I'm being challenged. Am I going to continue to feel like my soul is dying? Because that's what it felt like. And I felt like I was here to do something else. I felt like I had more potential and I wasn't really utilizing it. And so it was this terrible, limbo thing. But ultimately I was about to turn 40 and I said, okay, I got to go figure this out. And I don't know what my purpose is. All I knew from the leadership program, I had said, that I was born at this time in history to show people how to take off their masks and be real. And so that's what I had, and my coaching training. Yep. And the leadership training. And so off I went. My first business was called Dare to Be Real, Coaching and Consulting. And I had a real affinity towards working with young people, because I felt like if you could influence younger people sooner to start being more authentic and building their confidence, that, they would have an easier life and maybe not struggle as much as I did with self-esteem through most of my life. So that's where I started. I was doing speaking gigs in schools, and then I started doing workshops, and then principals and guidance counselors started saying, do you have anything just for girls? Right. The girls are really struggling. And I was like, oh, duh, like I'm a girl and I've had, almost all the same challenges. And so I kind of leaned towards, okay, now I'm going to focus on working with girls and women and helping them build self-esteem. And through that, I got connected to a 15-year-old girl in Florida who wanted to interview me. And I didn't understand why. I thought, why is this girl wanting to interview me? And I understood later, because she was the one who clued me in to how horses had these incredible gifts to offer us. And she told me horses saved her life. They help you get grounded, present, focused. You become a better leader. And she was doing, at 15, she was doing clinics for kids who had ADHD and autism. Now, I'm in my condo in Toronto, tears streaming down my face. And I thought, oh my gosh, how cool would it be to marry my passion for helping girls and women with my love of horses, which had been dormant because I had a traumatic experience with my horse as a teenager. I'm like, this could be so powerful. And then I thought, oh, we just have one problem. I'm terrified of horses because I never resolved that trauma.
Yeah.
So I hopped on a plane. I followed it was the same kind of sensation of I have to leave corporate. It was like, I have to go on this adventure. And so I got on a plane. I went to meet Danielle Herb, who we're still friends with today. And I began the journey of overcoming my fear. And I came back, started part boarding a horse, and it was just baby steps. And I got certified to do what I do. It was 13 years ago in May, as a certified facilitator of equine experiential learning is the technical term. There's different modalities. So I'm not a therapist. I bring my coaching background, my leadership background and training together with what I learned spiritually from this program. And what I've come to see over the years of doing my own work and working with people is that really I'm here to help people align with their own purpose. And a lot of times what's happening is there's trauma, unresolved trauma that's getting in the way of the confidence and the courage to actually go out there and do that thing. And so we have all kinds of limiting beliefs, stories, programs that keep us stuck or keep us in a position that doesn't nurture our soul. And so at some point, like the people who come to me, they're like, I've either been in therapy for X number of years and it's not really helping, or they just feel drawn to the magic and the power of seeing a testimonial and feeling like I need to go because I'm being called. And my horses will come to people in dreams sometimes to get them to come. So we're talking about next level of consciousness, in terms of they're not just these, my dad sometimes says, all they do is eat and poop all day long. Well, there's a whole other side. And most people, I believe, are not yet aware that they have these tremendous gifts to offer us. And I would not have turned my whole life upside down to pursue this path if I didn't feel the power and know the magic of it firsthand.
So Mena, a ton to unpack there, obviously, and I want to dive deep into this. But we talked very briefly backstage, kind of in the green room, about what you were going to kind of come up with there. And myself, with my background in the equestrian world, my family, we have standardbred racehorses. My father and I training Western pleasure and reining quarter horses, running quarter horses. It's a profound experience. And I always go to this when I talk with new people about horses, is that when you see a horse out in the field and you watch that fly land on their shoulder and they can control that little twitch muscle, they can feel every little aspect of that surrounding. And then you got to think that they're a prey animal. They're getting hunted in the wild. Every aspect of their life is to be completely aware and in tune with what's going on around them. And we drive by them, we fly by them on the 401 or on the highways, and they look beautiful out in the field. And until you kind of dive into that and you understand that prey animal, the way that they think, the way that they move, the way that they interpret different actions and body languages, I think it's fantastic that someone like yourself that is jumping in and tying that into some of the traumas that other people are dealing, because unfortunately they've maybe either too sensitive to the flies in their life or maybe not quite sensitive enough. Can you tell me a little bit of how you use the horses in your daily work to try to dive deeper into these people and their issues and concerns?
Absolutely. I'd love to. Well, first of all, my team consists of 7 horses. Most of them are former rescues. Okay. So they've either been abandoned in a field, starved, they've had their own challenges. So right from the get-go, there's a certain relatability that happens, right? And, the tendency is for somebody to say, oh, the poor things. And so we are here to help people understand how powerful they are. And my horses are not walking around feeling sorry for themselves with their head down or believing that there's something wrong with them. They are there to be walking examples of how your hardships can actually be directly connected to your purpose. And not only that's what makes you so powerful. So that's the beginning piece. And so I share a little bit about their stories when it's called for, right? It all really depends. We've been together. It's going to be 8 years, July 1st, that I basically took another flying leap of faith and left a 1-bedroom apartment to move to a 30-acre horse property and had 7 horses join me in less than a week. Wow. So
that's a dive. That is a deep dive.
That's a very deep dive, let me tell you. And I had a horse that was emaciated and I needed to learn how to feed. I had fences. I didn't know, I had traveled for 3 years. I did a 3-year traveling sabbatical to learn more about horses and from horses and to continue to overcome my fear. But that was next level. That was really next level. And now I'm responsible for all of them and feeding and hay. And I knew nothing about that stuff. So it was really sink or swim. And they were great teachers. They are great teachers. They continue to be great teachers to this day. But where was I going with all that?
You're talking about how you use horses to help people
right.
find them.
So they're former rescues, like I said, and then they are so on purpose that, for example, if I'm working with someone who is afraid of horses, which is often the case, because when do you ever get an opportunity to walk into a field with 7 horses? It doesn't really happen. And they're big and it's totally at liberty. So I have one horse, Apollo, they all have their special gifts, just like people. They have their gifts, their talents, their purpose. He's the one who allows people to just realize, oh, okay, I don't need to be afraid. So he will make himself small. He'll put his head down. He'll be so relaxed and he'll really invite them to come in. And I'm guiding as well. So somebody who understands what it's like to be afraid, I'm giving step-by-step little nudges to let's see how this feels. Let's step outside your comfort zone and try touching. Try this, try that. Can you move a little bit closer to them? And so that, I've worked with people who at the beginning of a private session are completely terrified. And by the end, they're hugging one of the other horses. Right. So that happens in that sense. But ultimately, they know these horses somehow, and I don't even know how, but they're on another level in terms of awareness and consciousness. So they know not only what they're feeling, but whoever is there, whether it's fear, anger, whatever is there, they know what they most need. So they will behave in a way that lets me know certain things. Can I share an example?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I have one horse whose name is Dream. He's got 2 blue eyes. He's a Tobiano paint, black and white. And I was doing a open house at some point, I think it was around Christmas time. And a young man came in and was totally magnetized to Dream. And so they do certain behaviors that let me know certain things. So Dream starts yawning. And it's just me and him at this point. The other people hadn't come in yet. So Dream starts yawning. And I said, okay, so when they yawn, he's not necessarily tired or bored. He's releasing tension that you have stored or that you're carrying with you. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. And then Dream starts pawing on the ground. And I said, so that's his way of letting me know that it's not just a little bit of stress or tension, that there's something pretty intense that you're going through or that's been happening. And he's like, yeah, I just got into the hospital. I was in the hospital for, I think it was 5 days. And I was like, oh, okay, are you going to be all right? He said, yeah, I'm going to be okay. And I said, okay, cool. And then Dream did something he's never done before. He bit his hand. And it wasn't like a grabbing and it wasn't a cute little nibble. It was very intentional, purposeful. And I was like, okay, Dream, what the heck is that? And so I just, tuned in and it came through. I didn't want to say it at first, but I said, did you just try hurting yourself? And he said, that's astounding. I was just in the hospital because I tried committing suicide.
Wow.
How did you guys know? And I was like, I don't even know. Like I said, it's not something that's ever happened before. And I said, are you okay, by the way, if I share this with people? Because again, it's a great story to share, to let people know that there's another level of awareness and talk about getting real. Like we went right to the crux of it. If that was a traditional therapy session, that might have been, we might have been talking about that and it would have never come up, because who wants to talk about that?
Nope.
So instead that came right through. And then Dream and him had this little love fest, and his sister was there as well. And it was just, they were leaving. And I think I said to the sister, I said, I feel like a hug. And he had already left and he comes running back. He goes, I want a hug. And it was like, I felt like he was a changed person from that little interaction. Now get this many years later, like just a couple months ago, I come across his profile on Facebook and I'm like, I know this guy. So I write him and I said, hey, do you remember meeting a horse with blue eyes in a barn? He's like, oh my gosh, yes. That experience changed my life. He's like, I never knew horses had this other, it's like a spiritual component. They're almost like people or whatever. And so it turns out that he is now, at that point, I think he was just over a year sober.
Wow.
And yeah. And then he said something about coming out. I said, you should maybe think about coming back to see the horse. And he's like, yeah, I think that would be really cool. And he's doing a podcast now too. He's doing his own to help other people who are going through addiction. And so we talked about it, but then nothing happened. And then he writes me again and he says, do you know that horse came to me in a dream? He's like, I think I really need to come back and do some more work, do some work with you. He's like, do you think he will remember me? I said, dude, he called you in a dream to come. So, you know, it's really, people say it's magical. Like they never cease to amaze me. And if I were working with him in that, like, that was just a little meet and greet. But if I were to work with him, then I would be looking at, okay, at what point did you first believe that, you know, you were not worthy, or that you were too, you know, that you needed to use whatever as a way to cope with whatever feelings you're having. So then I would go deep into that and then look at transforming and helping, because I believe that we've all experienced trauma to some degree or another. And sometimes I think the more trauma we've experienced, the more we are here to do in terms of service to humanity. So helping people understand the purpose of it helps them to get free of the stories of it, that, you know, there's something wrong with me, or I'm not lovable, or whatever the case may be. And I never even related. I would say, who am I to help people with trauma? Because only my horses have gone through stuff. And in my process of working with the horses, I discovered how much trauma I had actually experienced, but just didn't identify. I was like, no, type A, you got to keep going, you know? And I think a lot of people are in that place. And whenever their journey says it's time to look at this, is when they'll be able to look at it. And then having the horses and I as a guide, you know, will really help them to get there faster, instead of, you know, spending years in therapy and not feeling like you've progressed, or that you're still dealing with something that, and there's layers. There's, you know, I'm not trying to say that, you know, in one session, everything gets resolved, but a lot can happen in one session that really, you know, it's game changing for people.
I think that's such an interesting thing there, Mena. You were talking about that type A personality trait. And I've dealt with some pretty top-notch trainers around the world. And when you sit there, they're the kind of guy that just tips over the old water bucket and just watches. And they're the best in the world at what they do. And they are the ones that let that animal do what that animal's going to do. And then they come up with a plan. And you hear the old days of the wranglers and the rodeo breaking and busting horses and that sort of thing. And that's so dead. It's so long gone. And as functional, you know, if you had to put out a GM line of cars this afternoon, and that's how you got to work with horses, because that's what the option was back then. Terrible way of doing it. But we've come so far in being able to understand the way horses work and how they think, and the processes that go along with it. And most of the men in my life, and predominantly men, I hate to say this, they were the most easygoing guys in the whole world. You wouldn't know they were in the room until all of a sudden they get up and they just go and fix it. And that's a pretty magical thing, because all too often those type A personalities run out there, want to fix everything, and cause a million more problems with that horse than they can ever unfix in all the years. Again, so talking about a little bit about my father, who was a hell of a horseman. He ranched for years in British Columbia, just south of the Yukon border. And this is a guy that John Wayne always called him, a real cowboy.
Oh, John Wayne, when he first walked out of his truck, when I saw him, he just sauntered right over to me, shook my hand, looked me in the eye, tilted his head just like John Wayne. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy's a cowboy. And he was just the calmest presence I've been in. Yeah. Even when he was angry, he was calm. And that was scary. Yeah. I'm just saying, go ahead.
But those experiences, those people, those personas, horses read that. And when they look around the room and everyone's, like that type A personality, frantic, flying around, and then they see patterns. They understand patterns because of that prey animal experience. When the rest of the world is running around and it's high pace, they can settle into that. But when something isn't, when something is slow, when something is different, when someone is hurt, when someone is traumatized, when someone has those experiences, they can look at that and they can see that pattern differentiation, because in the nature, that's what keeps them alive. You're sitting there and the grass isn't moving the same way as the rest of the grass. Well, what's there, right? So I love those experiences. I love that that's, kind of your basis on that. So tell me a little bit about your traumatic experience growing up. And then I want to come back to this, because I kind of want to get a deeper understanding of why you just jumped into a 30+ acre horse farm on a Tuesday.
Well, let's see. I guess the main story, I mean, I had several as a young girl, but mostly I believed that I wasn't lovable because I was a girl. I think there are a lot of women who are walking around with that subconscious belief, or maybe even conscious, which is what leads to the type A, trying to prove, right? But the big thing that happened, so first of all, I fell in love with horses when we moved to Liberty Street, just north of Bowmanville. Right. And the neighbor had horses, and I fell in love, and I started drawing them. And ultimately I was like, Mom, Dad, buy me a horse, buy me a horse, buy me a horse, buy me a horse. And I believed mostly that my dad didn't love me. But one day he came home with a horse. And to me, that was the sign he actually did love me. And he brought me this horse. Her name was Lady. And I was over the moon. And everything was great until one day I'm riding Lady. And I'm by myself, and I'm just riding up beside the driveway. We had a long driveway. It was a 10-acre property. And a tractor trailer comes by, and Lady spooks, rears up. I managed to hang on. She comes down. She rears up again. I slide off. The saddle's kind of coming down. I don't even know. It was all chaos. But she hits the ground running. And we had, in the other side of the driveway, we had fencing that had barbed wire on the top. So she hits that, pops over, gets up, keeps running. And I'm standing there. And again, I was maybe 16, 17. I didn't have the emotional intelligence to say, oh, I just experienced abandonment, powerlessness, trauma, like all the things I felt all at once. I was calling, nothing was happening. She wasn't listening to me. And, I'm like, what the heck was that? So I decide that's it, never riding again. Now, my horse was the thing I loved the most. And I basically totally disconnected from her. And then my parents split up. We sold the farm, and I was away from horses for 24 years. Till Danielle shows up and tells me. So that was the trauma that happened. I think I can only say that it was a knowing that when she told me that horses helped you with self-esteem and confidence and leadership, it was just like this immediate knowing of, yes, this is like a winning combination, a perfect marriage to create results and impact at a level that I probably never would have experienced otherwise. And then for me to have to go through the journey myself of overcoming all the fear. And, you know, and right now I have a project horse. He's fairly new to me. His name was Havoc when he came, and he was bred to be a bucking horse out west. And when he came to me, he had never had a halter on him. Wow. And if I even went to take a step towards him, he'd be like, back off. And he'd just take care of himself and leave. So he was my birthday present 3 years ago to me. And we began but for me, that's the next level. And I believe that's what it is. It's like the more you overcome the next level of fear, the more confident you become. And then you take the next challenge and you keep going. And he basically allowed me to teach him how to put a halter on very slowly. And everything had to be very slowly with this. There's no type A about it. And that was part of it too. Spending time with horses and having the ability to just be present and be authentically me without having to, I mean, this is part of why I left corporate too. I was tired of being a different version of me based on who I was with. You know, I'd be somebody, if I was at work, if I was with friends, I was somebody else. If I was with family, another version. And I was like, that's exhausting. It's too much. I just want to be me. If you like me, great. If you don't, oh, well, you know, and sometimes I think that's probably one of the biggest things that most people are challenged by is worrying about what people are going to think and letting go of, you know, it doesn't matter. And by the way, if they don't like you, maybe you're just pushing a button for them. That's a signal of where they have an opportunity to look for what's the illusion that I'm buying into about myself. Right. But at any rate, he went from not being able to put a halter on, not even like never had his feet trimmed. So now all I need to do is touch his foot and he'll lift it. But we're still, you know, I can't walk him from the paddock to the barn yet. So, and it has to be slow and it has to be consistent. And, you know, I'm trying to manage 7 horses and life, and there's a lot happening. So, but basically I spent enough time with him too. Last year we had to move. That's the other thing. We moved in 8 years. We've moved 4 times. We're working on number 5, looking for our next home because the farm we're at right now is up for sale. But I basically worked with him to have him voluntarily walk on a trailer by himself.
Nice.
Without a rope, just at liberty, walk on a trailer. So that's and that's rewarding. That's fulfilling. And guess what? You know what his specialty is when it comes to working with people? Trust.
Right. Yeah. No.
Well, and so for those of you that don't understand what like sorry, James, I'll just one second.
I'll talk sometime. It's okay. Yeah. You go ahead, Pat.
This is a horse show. You knew what was going to happen. You knew what was going to happen.
When you guys are done, you let me know how it goes.
Like I want you at home to think about this. Okay, so a trailer. You think of a trailer. You see them running down the highway, and again, I'm going back to this. You have a prey animal that everything in its entire history of species eats it. And where do those animals that eat it live? A cave. And then you're going to put this cave on wheels and you're going to fly it down the highway. And they're dark. They smell like other animals. They have all of these other things going on. And you're like, get in that. You're like, no. I don't do caves, brother. I'm not big on caves because something in me from like great, don't do caves. Trust. James.
Well, it's going to be a very similar thing. So, Mena, I work with, where I have in my past worked with children and kids with autism and stuff like that. And the first mistake that I see people do is they go right in and they start talking and they start trying to fix and they start that type A that you're trying to. And the first thing that I've always done, whether it's a kid sitting outside a classroom who's sad or a kid I'm about to work with, I sit. I don't say anything. I just sit. I wait for them to want to engage with me because you have to build that trust. You can't work with them. You're not going to get them to do math. You're not going to get them to tell you what upset them this morning. You're not going to get them to do, tell you those deep, dark secrets or even, say a feeling. because they don't trust you. They don't know you. They don't have no idea. And I think it's interesting that it sounds like horses are very similar in the way that you definitely had to sit with them at first. You had to be there and go, I'm safe. You know what? We're just going to hang out here, you and me, and you're going to be safe the whole time I'm going to hang out. Now I'm going to come close to you with a bridle. I'm not going to put it on. You can trust me. I'm going to wait for you. You let me know when it's okay, and we'll put it on, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's that slow motion forward. You take small baby steps until they trust you. And it's amazing what you can get once they trust you. But if you go in flying and you start asking all these questions, then you're not going to get anywhere, and you end up spinning your wheels a lot. And so I see through your work with horses, it's very similar, I am going to assume, to your work with the people that come to the horses, because they don't know you when they walk on it. I know trauma myself, and I don't want to talk to a lot of people about what's been happening in my life, especially not Mena from Liberty Stalls. Like, I don't know her. Yeah, she has pretty horses, but I'm not about to tell her about what's happened in my life. Forget it. So how do you go about that? Is it similar to the way you deal with horses, or is it more in depth? Like, how do you go about that?
That's a great question. I think it took me a long time to recognize that as an empath, one of my gifts is that people had, and this was before I even started taking the coaching training, people would naturally start to tell me things about their life. Right. And that's continued throughout the years, where it's like, at first I was like, I don't know why that happens. And people say, I don't know why I'm telling you all this. But I feel like there's just some level of comfort that it is safe, that I feel like I have a huge heart. I have so much compassion, and like the horses, I don't have judgment. I don't look at anything that's happened and say, oh, you shouldn't have done that, or that's terrible, or I'm here to help people look at their stories, let go of any kind of victim mentality, so that they can be who they really are, instead of trying to do all these things to bury who you really are because you think something's wrong with you. So there's this natural feeling at first. And then I believe also that the whole energy of the environment, like you come to the farm and it's peaceful, and it's just, you're not around traffic. You're not around, all the distractions are gone. And now it's me, you, and the horses.
Right.
And I just ask questions, and people, I don't know, they feel that they can trust me, just like the horses know that they can trust me. And it just kind of unfolds naturally, like I said. And I learned it, you can't push it, you can't force it out. And I also say, like, we're not here to judge, we're here to assist. So the more open and curious you can be, the more you're going to get out of this, if you're going to be, and by the way, like, this doesn't really happen. The only time it doesn't happen is if somebody has not invested in themselves. And then sometimes they come, like, I remember in my first year, I did gift certificates, and a husband bought one for his wife, and it was like this, and she didn't want to talk about her feelings. And I was like, okay, never do that again. Right? So someone really has to want to change, to shift, and they're stuck and they're tired of going through the same thing and having the same pattern over and over and over and not being able to break it. So because I've invested in my own transformation and have, spent so many years and so many thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, they can get the clarity and the transformation much quicker. So, and again, it's about being open to sharing, knowing that there will be no judgment from any of us. And the horses really, they are so loving. It's incredible. Like, people feel the love, and it's pure. Then they know, and they're like, the jaws drop, and they're like, oh my gosh, And so when you go from fear to, here I am loving and hugging this horse, then everything becomes available to you, right? When you have fear, everything's shut down. Nothing can come in, nothing can go out. So yeah, Hopefully that answers your question.
It totally did. And I'm sure it helps that such a powerful, beautiful animal is taking the time to be gentle and kind to some people who have never experienced something powerful around them being kind. Like, I'm sure some of the people who have suffered trauma around have suffered at the hands of powerful people. And so being around something powerful could be a trigger. And so I would imagine that being around such a powerful, majestic animal and then finding out I'm still safe, there would be some sort of release to that. Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And also what I share with people is that we are just as powerful as those horses.
Right.
You know, we walk around thinking that we're not, or that somebody else has power over us. And I'm there to teach and share that, no, actually, you are the all powerful one. You just need to be reminded, because again, trauma or challenge or something happened and we believed, like my horse. So here's the completion of that story. I believed I was powerless.
Right.
And now I know, wow, my soul orchestrated not just that experience, but every experience that's been traumatic, to connect it to my whole purpose for being here now. I had to overcome my fear of horses. I had to see that, wow, what if that was perfectly tied to my destiny? And if I didn't do that, if that never happened, I couldn't be here now helping people overcome their trauma.
Right.
So I'm here to say we've all experienced trauma and we get to choose. Are we going to be a victim to that forever? Or are we going to say, wow, why did my soul want me to have that experience? And how can I leverage the wisdom from that to serve other people? That's a very select group of people. But even at the very least, if you understand, wow, I'm lovable, I'm amazing, I'm powerful and majestic and magnificent, just like that horse. And the horse comes, and by the way, they, like I said, they do incredible things. They'll come right up into your heart space and stay there so you feel how much love there is there. And some people have never felt that. I had one woman standing there with their hands out in the field saying, my soul took its first free breath.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's profound and powerful, and it's hard to explain. As I say often,
you're explaining it very well. Yeah. No, you're
Cool.
explaining it very well. I have felt that kind of release myself. And once you feel that release, it's a beautiful thing. Earlier, you were talking about the voices that we hear in our head, the ones that put us down. And so I often talk about that on I do a couple of videos when I run and stuff like that, because I had voices in my head. I had voices from other children. My dad was a wonderful man, don't get me wrong. But I didn't realize it. I didn't realize that I let these voices live rent-free in my head to keep me away from things, to hide me away, to make me uncomfortable in social situations, to make me feel lesser. So what I ended up having to do is realizing that I wasn't that, and that I had to bring in new voices to help out. Is that kind of what you do? Is you teach that, you know what, the reason that, you think, in your head, every time you look in the mirror, you think you're ugly, is because of an experience you had in the past. Well, that's not the case. Let's look at you. Like, you're beautiful. The horse loves you. We love you. The people in your life love you. There's so much evidence that what that voice is saying is not true. Is that kind of what you do?
Yeah, I actually teach, I call it like my 101. I teach people how to discern which voice they're hearing. Because I believe that we got two voices. We've got the ego, right? Saying, oh, you're not smart enough. You're not thin enough. You're not this enough. Who are you to go leave corporate? How are you going to make a living doing that? Who's going to come and believe that you horses talk to you or whatever, all those things. And then you have the higher self or the soul that's in your heart that's saying, no, go do it. So I think the challenge is that most people don't understand there's two. So they just think, oh, I'm this, I'm ugly, I'm not smart enough, they think that's who they are. And I use actually structures to help to create a visual so they can see. If you ever watch Flintstones, you know how they have the two over there. So I use
Yeah,
that
yeah.
analogy just to do something visual to help them with the discernment, because
Right.
when ego's running around in your head, it can get, you can go down that hole and it can be very difficult to come out, right? So even within a session, I start with that as part of the sessions, as a foundation, and then throughout the experience, whatever, if it's a group or a private, I will invite people to start to actually practice which voice. They might say something, I go, and they think it's the truth, and I say, which voice is that? And they're like, oh yeah, that's the ego. Right. So as
Yeah.
soon as you can now identify that's the ego, now we know, okay, that's not me, but thank you, I see you. As soon as you see that it's ego, that's where you're back in your power. I see you, ego. And this I learned from my mentor, Franco de Nicola, who passed a couple years ago. But basically, it was like, it's a 4-step process. I see you, I thank you, I love you, and I release you. And sometimes the ego is going to hang on, and you got to really, and this is where I guide people, because a lot of times they were like, no, I'm never going to thank the ego for that story, right? But ultimately, you're only holding yourself back from your own liberation. So it's like, okay, why might you have wanted that experience? And again, oftentimes it's to help people understand who they really are versus who they think they are, or it's connected to their purpose. So I start with that and help them go away with a strategy to help deal with that voice when it comes up.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the partial thing, and then helping them to transform the perspective, right? So I'm trying to think of a good example. I mean, gosh, I've worked with, people who've gone through sexual trauma. I'll
Yeah.
use that one because that was kind of most recent, right? It's like, okay, you believe all these things because of that experience. Now, what if you look at, why did your soul, if you know that you're lovable, and yes, you have to assume that truth for a second, then why would your soul want you to have that experience? And if you have a calling to help people, which I believe most people do, then usually that's kind of like the direct line, the direct connection to, I needed to have that experience to be able to relate to and call in people who've gone through the same thing so I can help them become free. But I have to do it first, just like my own journey with first the horses and then all the other things.
It's so funny you say that, because through our podcast here, Soaring Prophets, we've met so many people who have said basically the exact same thing. From Bob, who was a recovering addict who suffered sexual abuse, and now he runs
Recovery Speaking Initiative.
Recovering Speaking Initiative. There's so many examples through our past of the people we interview, and you're absolutely right. It's like because you're an explorer, and you explore through that kind of trauma, you build a roadmap. And once you have that roadmap, you can like shine a light and make it a little bit easier. It's not going to be easy for people who suffer trauma, but you can make it a little bit easier because, like you said, you can talk about how that's not you, that's something else. It's funny. So I just started studying on my own. It's called internal family systems. And it's very much about breaking down those voices. And I'm not going to explain it well because I'm at the beginning of learning it. But one of the podcasts I listened to on it was talking about how people who are addicted because they're protecting themselves from trauma. And so what you do is you pretend that the addiction is in a chair, and you talk to the addiction like it's outside of you. And the counselor was talking about how the addiction is saying, I'm here to protect them. And the reason that they're trying to protect them is so they don't kill themselves, so that they can pull themselves away from the trauma enough so they don't do that ultimate, I'm going to kill myself. So the addiction is actually a good thing. It's not being used the right way, but it's a good thing. So like you said, you touched upon forgiving it, thanking it, being appreciative of going through that experience. And a lot of this internal family systems talks about appreciating what these different things, these different systems do for you, even though they're toxic in some way, they're still helping you in some way. And if you can appreciate that, then you can examine it further and it can help you. Like I said, beginning days for me, so I cannot explain it well, but it's very interesting. And Mena, if you get a chance, I would look in internal family systems. It's right up the alley of what you're talking about. Super interesting stuff. Lots of podcasts about it, and people out there. I'm just getting into it myself. Gonna knock my microphone over. I'm so excited, but it's very interesting. I'm finding it helpful in my own life, and I'd like to go back. We don't have a lot of time left. Unless, Pat, do you have something? I don't want to.
No, I like what you're talking about there. I think that all those things that you just discussed, they're very valid, right? Like I know a few people that we've interviewed, and I'm trying to put them into those exact positions. And it's kind of uncanny the way that you've explained that. I get that completely what you're saying.
So I was going to talk about trauma. And so recently, it's funny, I go to counseling. I have no problem telling people that. I think that the more people that look put together, talk about how they go to counseling and they've suffered trauma and they go through stuff and they talk to counselors about it, the more people that can go accept that and go get help. So anyway, I was having this conversation with my therapist, and recently I told a friend about something that happened in my childhood. And my friend went, "Oh my God, thank you so much for sharing that. What a horrible experience. I can't believe you went through that. That must have been awful." I'm like, "What? No, I'm just telling you a story about my childhood. What are you talking about?" So then I went to my therapist to talk about it, and she goes, "James, that was a traumatic experience. Like you have had so many traumatic experiences in your life that you do not recognize what real trauma is. What your trauma is there's a higher threshold. But you really do have all this trauma that you have to deal with, if you know what I mean." So it's interesting. You had a moment where you said that people walk through life with trauma and don't even know they have it. And I was wondering if you could share one of those experiences, like someone who comes and feels like, you know what, I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. And then realizes that, no, you know what, I do have something.
Ooh, let me think. I mean, I think a lot of times what happens is I'm calling on my own, I'm sharing some of my own stories. For example, when I was a kid on Liberty Street, again, we had a hobby farm, and I was super sensitive, and animals were dying all the time. So I created a belief, and it was traumatic for me because I was a sensitive little soul. And so I made it mean that I was responsible and that I killed them.
Wow.
So so imagine when I'm going to buy my first horse.
Yeah.
And I have that and I didn't know. I didn't I was like, yeah, I want to, but no, I can't. Right. And so ultimately discovered that I had this deep story. And at, 6, 7, 8 years old, walking around believing that I'm a terrible person, and that I have the power to kill all these young, sweet animals, including a puppy. I had an experience where I was playing baseball with my brothers, and I pitched the ball. I was a pitcher, pitched the ball. My brother hit the ball, hit the puppy in the head. He goes down like this, and I start freaking out. My mom comes running. What happened? She gives the dog mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and he lives.
Wow.
For about a month. And then I find out he's dead when he came home from school one day.
Right.
So that experience only came up when I found the dog that is now my dog, named Phoenix, who was Sparky back then. But ultimately, I believed, even though at the time if you asked me, I would blame my brother.
Right.
Because he's the one who hit the ball. But deep down, I believed it was me. And I had horses that died, and I believed it was my fault. So ultimately I had to uncover all that. And I had a woman who came to me she came for actually, it's probably the solstice is coming up. It would be about 3 years ago now. And she wanted to know if she felt like she wanted to do similar work, but she's never had an experience with the horses in this capacity. So she comes, she's like, okay, I always start out, what's your intention? If you could wave a magic wand, what would you like to know? She's like, I want to know if this is what I want to do for my career. So as we're working with her, it comes up, she's got the same story of being
Wow.
an animal killer.
Interesting.
But if you asked her if she had that trauma, it wouldn't be there. But because I was loosely sharing my own experience, she's like, oh my gosh, right? So we were able to work through that. Most people, I think, when they're coming to me, they know, because I'm pretty vocal about the fact that I do work with this. There was a time that that video that you were referencing the other day, the woman had come to me, did not talk about addiction or alcohol at all, was just, you know, I'm afraid of horses. And then it was almost a 2-day private retreat. And I was just looking for all the stories and transforming all the stories. She went from being terrified to walking one of my horses on a trail around the property, 100-acre property. And a few months later, she wrote me and she said, oh my gosh, that changed my life. She came feeling lost, disconnected, doing a job she didn't want to do, living in Toronto. And she ended up telling me, I quit my job. I left Toronto. I'm working and living in Northern Ontario, Muskoka area. And I let go of my addiction to alcohol. And meanwhile, addiction to alcohol did not even come into the equation. But because we got to the root cause of the need for the alcohol, she was able to do that. And then also start to eat better, start to, you know, intake foods that were nurturing instead of toxic, etc. So,
Mena, how do people
most
get in
people,
touch with you?
Well, I'm on Facebook, Mena Canonico, Liberty Lane Retreats. I'm on Instagram, Mena and the Freedom Herd. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm on all the social platforms. And my website is libertylaneretreats.com, where somebody can book a complimentary discovery call to find out more.
Perfect. Well, so Mena, we are kind of up against the time right now, and I'm sorry to cut you off there. I wanted that was a deep question with like 5 minutes before we got to wrap this up. So I apologize that. I'd love to have you on again. Obviously, this is right up what we're trying to do. Bring really interesting people with their interesting stories and what motivates them and helping other people. This is right up our alley. It's been a pleasure to have you. Mena, this is the point in the show where we kind of stick you with the last word. So I want to thank you again. Thank you for joining us. And from me, as always, folks, let's make some money together. James, try to keep it quick.
I'll try and keep it quick, but I'm never quick. We have a great guest next week. I was just looking it up. She's amazing. Karen, I don't know anything about her at this moment, but I will. We have so many guests coming up that are incredible. We have a lot of new LinkedIn friends from the great hounds of business and Sia herself. Like to thank you all. I know you're probably watching this right now, and we appreciate everything you've done for us. Lisa Browning, you're incredible. I just love the fact that we get to tell these stories where someone has overcome their fear, has maybe suffered trauma and used that trauma to guide others. And I think what you're doing, Mena, is such a beautiful, wonderful thing. And the stories that you just told us, I could visualize, and they're very touching. And I really appreciate you, and I appreciate that you came on. And if you're out there and you've tried counseling, you've tried all kinds of things, maybe it's time to reach out to Mena and hang out with her blue-eyed horse and just see if maybe you can get some release. Even sometimes just saying it, whispering it in a horse's ear, what you're going through, can really release. Believe it or not, done it myself with my own dog, Charlie. Let's heal our minds, bodies, and souls together. Now, Mena, this is your time. You get to say your piece, and then at the end, give us one word or one little saying of inspiration.
Okay. Well, my first thing I want to say is, remember, you are so much more powerful than you can even imagine. And if you have even a little bit of an inkling or a calling in your heart to follow something, follow a dream, I invite you to do that. And just know that if it's a dream, it can be possible. All of this, I remember at the very beginning saying, could I actually do this? And here I am 8 years later with my own team, the Freedom Herd, helping me do that. And so if I can do it as a little girl afraid of horses on a farm on Liberty Street, then you can do it too. So I encourage you to just listen, tune in, listen, and you will not regret it.